is what he's doing here, what you just discovered there. So, good job. Yep. Well, because typically, if you're looking in Revelation, what's happening? Revelation 6:1 or seal number 1. There's a horse, and someone goes out on that horse, and what are they trying to do? Conquer. And what's that? If you're conquering? What's that sound like?
The first one is
a battle. And what's Noah's flood? Talk about a trial. Same thing. So basically, God can utilize trials to cause separation. Just like he did with the flood. Here, you with me? Get in the boat. Are you not? That's a separation. So it's the same principle, just different context, different way of looking at it, but the same principle he discovered. Yep. And then there was a second one, though. And God, same thing. He separated based on who was interested in spiritual things, God, and who wasn't. Same principle, just keeps repeating and repeating and repeating. He just found it. Yeah, it's the sentence he came up with. Yeah, how God is separating light and dark, and often he'll bring the separation. What causes the separation is trials, hence the flood in other cases, and that's the principle. It keeps repeating and repeating and repeating. Yeah, very good, good job. What's your word again? Remind me. Seal sign or mark. Okay. What are you guys coming up with so far? Did you? Oh, I can put these on. I can. Did you wrestle through Genesis 4? Okay.
You gotta come up with an obvious.
So you're getting verses. You're getting kind of the meat. Like, so for example, if I were to call on you and say, okay, Genesis 4:15, what's that mean that Cain was marked?
He was saved from death.
Okay.
Nobody could kill him.
Okay. Yep.
Okay. I doubt it.
No. This is good stuff. What you said, I didn't see.
Oh. What we talked about.
Yeah, no, I'm not trying to pressure you or make you feel bad. What you're saying is fantastic. You didn't look as confident as your words were. Your words are fantastic. You just didn't look convinced of it.
Well, I'm not convinced.
It sounded more like a question. Did your group like the way you worded it?
I think we all agree.
Okay. So, look up because our purpose is, at the end of the day, what does this have to do with the seals? So go to the seals. We'll let you experience it on behalf of your group. So go to Revelation 6:1, and we'll test your theory. So, and then just read verse 2, Revelation 6:2.
Also what Esther was putting herself.
Standing there, his bride was carried a bow, and the crown was placed on his head. He rode out to win many battles.
Okay, and what translation have you got?
Like for children's stories.
So read your verse 2.
Now they have a chance.
And I saw and behold a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him. And he went forth conquering and conquering.
So if you were to I mean, we're not in the military, but if you can imagine being in the military, or if you saw a television show where you had a bunch of people, they're on horses, and they're out riding with bow and arrows to conquer, what's that sound like is going to happen?
Someone's going to lose and someone's going to win.
Okay, excellent. How else could we describe that? No, this is very good, very good. Someone's going to win, someone's going to lose. How else would you, not in a game, but real life, someone's going to die. Now read what you had there for your little interpretation of Genesis 3 or 4:15.
What I have heard?
Yep.
That it's a mark as a distinction.
To protect
We had it
from, and how did you put it? You didn't write it, but you thought it.
Yeah, it was protected.
Protect Cain so he didn't die.
Yeah,
But as you just read Revelation 6:2, it sounds like a whole lot of
somebody's going to die.
sounds like a whole lot of dying. You will start finding gold when you understand what that means. You're like, oh, because right now they sound like polar opposites.
Well, see, I would never have read
no wonder, yeah.
on my
I felt lost
own
way.
Revelation 6:2 and put it together with Cain getting the mark.
Sure, well, that's why we're here working together. We can all help each other. You got an excellent verse, and I like what you said.
Might not be coming.
And now your group, whether it's this verse or other verses, now your group has to figure out how do those two verses play together? Because they do 100%. They're not saying different things. They're saying the same thing. Because remember, in Revelation, that things are 90% symbolic, and this is a symbolic word. And when you're using the word, it changes. The word is the same, like seal, mark, or sign, but it goes through a change. It now isn't literally on the battlefield, or literally if you're in the Garden of Eden. It's a universal principle that can happen to anyone, anywhere. So what spiritually or can we learn from Genesis 4:15 that we could plug in there? That's like, oh, they are saying the same thing. Because your verse is awesome and your words are awesome.
Well, I still have a question.
Well, that's good, yeah. You had one first, and then I'll come back to you. Okay, so what was your question?
Okay, so, yes, does it apply to other seals? The same verse, like, can we apply these verses to all
Yeah,
seals?
that's what he says.
Our word seal.
Yep, we picked
Yeah.
property in Frisco. It just too much.
If you get the right interpretation, it goes for seal. First, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, because they're all seals.
All the seals are protecting us
Yeah,
from
but I'm
basically the
going
second death.
It's the personal that up.
Okay, we're starting to get somewhere.
Position and responsibility.
Yeah,
So Mike is coming back on Friday. So I can,
which one?
I can have him bring some.
Did you have a question before I slip another table?
Yeah, they're really nice.
So would all of these, you can make a connection to
Say herself.
These are like the main ones that pop out, like, because it's like in reference to Esther, only the king can kiss her and make the seal. You can make the correlation between God and the king. With this one, the letters were written sealed with the king with Ahab's seal, like a mark.
So you're discovering here where this, just like Genesis, where is this coming from? Who's the power and authority to make it happen? Only the king, which spiritually is God. So you could even,
Goes with the verse she found.
which one's that?
Yeah, no one's ever done it.
Okay. Which is,
I don't think so. Yeah.
We can't mark ourselves.
so you can't do it yourself. Oh, if you only knew what you guys were discovering. There's one in Daniel. Remember when Daniel himself was in trouble? You remember what happened to Daniel? Little kids say it. He was thrown into the lion's den, and then the king sealed it. Why? So no one could hurt him. There's more there, but look at that up in Daniel. And here again, it sounds complete. Has to solve even though it sounds like they're saying the total opposite, they're saying the exact same thing. And as you guys discover that, you'll just be so happy that someone else didn't steal your thunder. But you're doing very good thinking. Very, very good thinking. I know I'm not remembering. All right, does everybody have at least 3 or 4 verses? Let's see a show of hands here. Does every table have at least 3 or 4 verses for their words? All right. All right, so let's take a stab at it. Let's take a stab at it here. So let's be chronological here. We'll start first with the first table.
This purpose might not be changed concerning
So, David,
that was to protect.
nice biblical name. David, you found a fantastic verse. So we're going to look at the word first, because it's the first seal. And so what verse did you stumble upon that shows up first in the Bible? Genesis 1:5, which only makes sense, because that's where you pop into the first day. All right, so what are some of the principles you discovered there that happened? Genesis 1:5, we're looking up the word first. Okay?
That God created night and day.
Okay. So we have night
Made.
and day. All, depending on your translation, it's also going to not only be night and day, but it'll be dark and light. Because during the day you have light, night you don't, etc. Okay? Okay, anything else?
He separated dark from the light.
Okay, so there's light and day, night and day, dark and light, and God is the one that separates the two. Okay? Very good. All right. What's another verse that you guys came to? And then we'll come back and we'll start tying this together.
He also got Genesis 8:5.
Genesis 8:5. Okay. Genesis 8:5. And what did you get from that verse?
On the first day of the 10th month, tops of the mountains became visible after the flood.
Okay. So this is after Noah's flood. After Noah's flood, then how would you describe it? What would you want me to put here? After Noah's flood,
Waters receded.
so yeah, they saw relief, so to speak, or relief, R-E-L-E-A-V-E or F-E?
I.E.
I-E-F. Or yeah, R-E-L-I-E-F, relief. All right, so after Noah's flood, then they started to see the relief, okay? And as we talked about at your table, Noah's flood was a type of separating. Just like in the beginning, God separated light from dark. Here at Noah's flood, when he's separating people of the light or of the dark, meaning people who believed and trusted him versus those who didn't believe and trust God. If you believed him, you got on the ark. If you didn't get on the ark. So even again, here in this same story, in Noah's flood, there's a separation. And the people who trusted and believed God would be people of the day or light, etc., faith. And then as they're going through that experience and afterward, they started to see relief after the separation. Okay? Any other verse you wanted to share here? We want to go to another table.
Genesis 25:25.
Genesis 25:25, okay.
And it said that Esau was the firstborn.
Okay, so Genesis 25:25. and Esau. Okay, and was the firstborn. Okay. Anything else about this story you want to enlighten us with that you talked about at your table that was consistent with what you've already discovered, remember?
And he had a twin, Jacob.
He had a twin who was Jacob. Okay, and what happened between these two?
They were separated.
There was a separation. And in simple terms, what separated them? One was interested in God or spiritual things. And the other one was more interested in things that are earthly, here and now. Like literally the lentil soup. One was interested in, oh man, God and spiritual things. And the other one's like, man, I'll give on my birthright just for some soup. So there was a separation. So you would expect, oh, well, before we unveil it here, Richard, Dalen, as you were doing first also, anything else you would add in here in your...
Yeah, well, we're looking, hello? We were looking at some books after Psalms, and we had several from Isaiah.
Yeah, very nice.
Which I'll have to look up here. So we had Isaiah 41, verse 4.
Okay, very good. Isaiah 41:4.
Yep, should I read it? Who hath wrought and done it, calling the generations from the beginning? I, the Lord, the first and with the last, I am He. And there's two more texts from Isaiah.
If you read all the way from verse 1 to 10, you're getting even more rich context. What was your other one you were going to go to in Isaiah?
Yeah, Isaiah 44:6.
Very good. Okay, Isaiah 44:6. Very good. All the way through 8 is very good. Isaiah 44:6 through 8. Okay, which is like a mirror of the same one you just read.
Right. Thus saith the Lord, the King of Israel, and his Redeemer, the Lord of hosts, I am the first and I am the last, and beside me there is no God. And also we have Isaiah 48, verse 12.
Well, read before we leave 44:6 through 8, read 7 and 8.
Hang on, 44. You want verses 7 and 8?
Yeah, give us some more rich context here.
And who, as I shall call and shall declare it, and set it in order for me, since I appointed the ancient people, and the things that are coming and shall come, let them show unto them. Fear ye not, neither be afraid. Have not I told thee from that time, and have declared it? Ye are even my witnesses. Is there a God beside me? Yea, there is no God. I know not any.
Okay, so as you went through Isaiah 41 and chapter 44, what did you and Dalen get from that?
To
It's
us,
clearly from God.
to us, the first represents God.
Okay, yeah, clearly this,
Yeah.
this is God is doing something here.
Right.
And anything else that you were getting there? Anybody else picking up anything there? So it's clearly a connection to God, but what is God, what else is being laid out in these verses here?
Well, he's not just the first, he's the only. The first, the last, and the only.
Yeah, so I mean, he is locking that in. We're talking about God here. Okay, very definitely. But God is, he's clearly saying, especially in the chapter 44, that there will be people who are his witness. He's referring to here that that there will be people who are going to be his witnesses. He's first and he's last, and he's expecting some witnesses. Okay, you see that? Okay, so have you got, what would be another place you would take us? We're looking up white right now. Or first. On page 6 in
Let's
our
see,
booklet.
we also had Isaiah 48:12,
Okay,
which I think is
Isaiah
more of the
48:12,
same.
another good one.
Yeah. And I think it's similar to these. Yeah, same idea. Hearken unto me, O Jacob and Israel, my called. I am he. I am the first. I also am the last.
Okay, very good. Let's, for the sake of time, let's slip over to 1 Peter. 1 Peter, chapter 4. 1 Peter 4. If you want to look at the extensiveness later, we're in 1 Peter 4, 14 through 19. 1 Peter 4, 14 through 19. Peter writes, if you're persecuted for the name of Christ, you're blessed, because the Spirit of the glory of God rests on you. He's talking about persecution, trials, challenges. Make sure that none of you suffer because you're actually doing something wrong, like murder, thief, evildoer, troublemaker, meddler, etc. But if any of you suffer as a Christian, you're not to be ashamed, but you're to glorify God. It is verse 17, for it is time for judgment to begin with the household of God. If it begins with us first, what would we expect of the outcome to those who do not obey and appreciate the gospel? For verse 18, if it's difficult that the righteous are saved, what will become of the godless and the sinner? Therefore, those also who suffer according to the will of God shall entrust their souls to the faithful Creator in doing what's right. So again here in Peter, he's talking about trials, because again, like Noah's flood, trials have a way of causing separation. Challenges have a way of separating. Where do you stand on God? This is almost like Laodicea, Revelation 3. Hey, don't be just kind of, God, are you with me or are you against me? And this is, God can allow challenges and trials to come into our life to cause that separation. And where does this typically, at least according to Peter, where does that start? According to Peter, with the house of God, which we would interpret to be professed believers. God might actually try a little separating with his own people. Hey, who's with me? Who's with me? And he'll cause that separation. Based on, are you interested in God and spiritual things, or are you more interested in just the here and now? Which was the difference between these two. Neither were amazing. Jacob was all kinds of trouble. His only saving grace was he liked God. He was a mess. He sure was. Just like us. But he liked God, and so God was allowed to be in his life and to grow him. So as we're going through the seals, as you're going through the first seal should have something to do. The first seal should have something to do, as Richard helped us see so clearly. It's clearly about God. Things are dying, Pastor. They sure are. But it should have something to do with God allowing challenges to come to cause a separation to see who's with me. And in the seals, seal number 1, what do you see? Someone riding with a bow and arrow causing some challenges. If someone's trying to bring a bow and arrow and they're going to shoot you, that's a serious challenge.
So your position is that the separation is within the church itself and not necessarily church and unchurch?
No, in the specific sense of this, it was happening. But in the world, God's doing this with everybody. Yeah. More than one thing is true sometimes at a time, because there's a lot of things converging. Like for example, with the first seal, we're looking at like 7 different symbols. So when you put all 7 together, it's not just, this is not, my understanding, it's not just a message to the church. There is a message that's just to say my denomination, but it's not seal number 1. No, absolutely not. Yeah. All right. Making sense? Okay. All right, let's go on to table 2. Cynthia, Jan, Kayla, Emil. What was your word that you were looking up?
Seal, mark, sign.
Seal, mark, or sign, okay. Because these are the 7 seals. And depending on your translation, it may say mark or sign, or with various translations. Okay. And so where was the first place this showed up that your group wrestled with a little bit, but you're on to some very good gold? Where's the first place this word showed up in the scriptures?
Genesis 4:15.
Genesis 4:15, very good. And so if you'll read that verse and invite everybody else to our confusion here.
The Lord replied, "No, for I will give a 7-fold punishment to anyone who kills you." Then the Lord put a mark on Cain to warn anyone who might try to kill him.
So long story short, this is Cain and Abel, Adam and Eve. They had a child, the firstborn. I've shared in other times in other ways that basically their firstborn they thought was going to be the Messiah. Oops, turned out to be Cain. He kills the secondborn, Abel. And so after Cain kills Abel, he thinks that he's going to die. And so God himself, God comes along. And what does God say to Cain? God tells Cain, and what does God tell Cain? That this mark shows, this mark or seal indicates, the seal or mark indicates, and what did you say, Jan, that this mark indicates?
That no one can kill him.
Yes. No one will kill you. And yet, Kate, you look fairly quick here on your fancy phone. Read Revelation 6:2 for us. See if we can get really well and confused here. Revelation 6:2. Revelation 6:2. Because we're looking at this seal number 1. And this is where we get the word seal from, one of the places. So read with the microphone, Revelation 6:2.
And I looked, and behold, a white horse. He who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went out conquering and to conquer.
So here in Genesis 4:15, God himself is telling someone that, hey, if you have this seal, it's going to indicate that you will not die. And yet in Revelation 6:2, here comes, some presence that God is causing, and they're coming with a bow and arrow. And when you're in a battle and someone gets you with lots of bows and arrows, you tend to die. Sounds very different on the surface. Sounds very different on the surface. So we'll come back to this. So what's some other verses that your group discovered that was also very helpful?
We have Esther 8:8.
Esther 8:8, very good.
It says, "Now go ahead and send a message to the Jews in the king's name, telling them whatever you want, and seal it with the king's signet ring. But remember that whatever has already been written in the king's name and sealed with his signet ring can never be revoked."
Okay, so obviously here the seal symbolizes what? As again, it's from God. And God's seal, what about God's seal here?
The message that the Jews could protect themselves. Is that it?
No. God's not into self-protection.
Just that his word can't be taken back.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
God's seal can't be revoked is what she read. So meaning if God sealed it, He sealed. This is good luck changing it. Similar to what He told Cain. Hey, if I've got you sealed, you won't die. Oh, but if I sealed you, you're good. Okay? All right, so next verse. Might not make a lot of sense yet, but you're getting the good principles are coming out here.
We have Daniel 6:17.
Daniel 6:17, okay.
And it says, "A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den. The king sealed the stone with his own royal seal and the seals of his nobles so that no one could rescue Daniel."
All right. So, long story short, this is the story of Daniel in the lion's den. He was thrown into the lion's den. And who threw him in there?
The king.
The king, okay, which again is, symbol of God. So the king, because God is the ultimate king, the king put a believer in there. And why did he do it? To protect him. Because this king was afraid other people were going to mess with him. So he put him down in there. And what was down in there? Lions. Last week we discovered the lions, one of the main interpretation of a lion is what? Oh, Jesus. So the king, if you're in trouble, the king just might be wanting to put someone closer to Jesus and then sealing you. To protect you. And we used to always tell those little stories that, oh man, this was so terrible, and oh, I hope it works out. And what was God doing? Putting him closer. The Father would be putting him closer to Jesus and putting a seal over him so he'd be just fine. Protecting him. Okay? All right, any other verse here? I think someone else had some other verses I remember you guys saying that were quite useful. I think maybe Cynthia was one of the other ones that you were saying.
Was Leviticus
Yes, the Leviticus one.
19:28.
Oh, a little louder with the mic. Leviticus what?
Okay, wait, I have to find it. Give it to
She's looking for it. I think Jan has one.
2 Corinthians 1:22. Okay, we'll come back to Leviticus. 2 Corinthians 1:22.
Who has also sealed us and given the earnest of the Spirit in our hearts.
So this is God's sealing. This is 2 Corinthians 1:22. Is your understanding that's God's sealing with Holy Spirit in hearts? Is what your understanding is there of Paul? Okay. Now let's hear the Leviticus one. And what was the text and verse?
Leviticus 19:28.
Leviticus 19:28, okay.
You should not make any cuts in your flesh for the dead, nor print any marks upon you. I am the Lord.
Okay, so basically he's saying, hey, don't do these, depending on your translation, seal marks or signs. Don't put any marks on yourself. Don't do it yourself.
Right. Basically, we cannot mark ourselves. Only God can mark us.
Okay. So, can't seal or mark self. Okay. So we certainly have enough here. Was there anything else that you just thought was so profound you can't leave it out? Or are we ready to make a good understanding here? I think we got enough here. So did your group ever justify how different most of this sounds from what she read? Because in the seals, most of the seals, lots of stuff dies, including seal number 1. I mean, he's going out there with bow and arrow, and he knows where you live. He's coming coming with a bow and arrow. And when people get shot with bow and arrows, a lot of arrows, you tend to die. He conquered. And yet here it's like, no, you won't die. God will seal you. So, are you able, before the vultures want to try and help, how would you understand this is saying the same thing as what the seals are trying to talk about? And specifically, we're in the first seal right now.
I think the consensus was just that the seal, obviously, it's placed by God.
Can't touch you, hence Daniel in the lion's den. You know, God's seal isn't revoked. If he's protecting you, you're fine. Satan's not going to eternally be able to affect you. Okay, also very good, but still not quite the main point, but the very, very good stuff. Very, very, very good stuff. We just still haven't completely connected it with how can we say that no one's being killed, yet in Revelation 6:2 it clearly says you will die. How do you justify those two? Because the Bible doesn't compete. They're not saying two separate things. Remember the rules of Revelation, that the words are the same, but they change. So when we start taking these words and we plug them into Revelation, these are symbols. So in Revelation, we're talking about what Kate read in Revelation 6:2. That's a symbol.
Of eternal life, maybe? I don't know. That's not a symbol.
If we have to die to live, is what we've been learning.
Things, but it still but this is the best thing I've heard from this table tonight. It still sounds a little bit like a question, but that's fantastic. So connect the dots then to this, to Revelation 6:2, in the context of what you just said. You're not sure? That's okay. Most people aren't. That's okay. Anybody help this table? How do we justify this with Revelation 6:2? They've taken us a long ways. Or maybe another way to word it in Revelation 6:2, when he's going...
That's not a symbol. Is that a symbol? That's a
What's that?
conquering.
It is a symbol. In Revelation 6:2, when he goes out to conquer, it's a symbol. And what's it representing? Your group is so close. Okay, Daniel?
I think it means that God is sealing us for eternity. Even if we die on this earth, we'll still live in eternity with Him in heaven.
You're looking in the right direction. You're looking in the right direction, but we need this. It should be clearer. You're looking in the right direction, though. There's arrows going out to conquer and kill people. Makes me be depressed. It's my birthday, and you're causing me to be depressed on my birthday. Like I failed you as a teacher because I've said this over and over and over for almost 3 years I've been here. Yeah, Shaughnessy, help them.
So if it's Jesus conquering, it's a good thing.
So you're trying to connect dots, and you're saying if it's Jesus conquering, it's a good thing.
So if he's shooting the bows at us,
If Jesus is shooting the bows at us,
we want to die because
we would want to die because what's actually happening?
because we're dying in Christ.
You're not actually dead,
Right.
as in go to the cemetery. He's describing what kind of a death.
Like a reborn, like a spiritual death.
Dying to sin, dying to selfishness. Yes, I'm getting goosebumps.
So he's like, it's like when you said he's breaking, like Jesus
Yes.
was broken.
Like it says here, why does he say in Genesis 4:15, you're not going to literally die? Because in the seals, it's not, seal number one is not talking about literal death. God is not sending out, we haven't discovered this part yet fully, so I won't give that answer fully yet, but whatever these horses represent, they are not going out literally killing people with bows and arrows. It's a spiritual symbol that God is sending out these horses to cause death spiritually, so that people die to sin and selfishness. And as this table helped us discover in the first, or the number one, God will cause a separation. Who wants to die to sin and selfishness? Who's with Jesus? God will do that separating. I mean, make no mistake, He will cause a separation. How's He going to do it? With His arrow. And He will cause a separation. Well, how do I know if I'm His? Do you even know, and most of the world doesn't, do we even know that God, when He died on the cross, the entire Christ in me study, which is why we go through that first, which is what you were regurgitating, you're just connecting the dots more. As Jesus died on the cross, who died? Christ died as me. So here comes God with the horse, with that arrow, and He's trying to get more people to be dead to sin and selfishness. So they're conquered and they're dead. And they're no longer His enemy because He killed their sinfulness and their sin and them. He conquered them. He overcame you. What was Jacob's biggest issue? He was selfish and horrible until he allowed God to conquer him when they wrestled all night. And he said, oh, finally. Just like I've shared many times. What's your biggest issue? You. My biggest issue is me. Until God comes and conquers you. Not a literal death. Spiritual. Why do you think so much, as I said this over and over and over, why do you think so much in Revelation dies? A minority of it is referring to literal death. The overwhelming majority of stuff in Revelation that dies is referring to this, spiritual death. Like I said in the beginning, that is supposed to reveal Jesus again and again and again. And what's God's crowning act of His greatest mastery and artistry in all of scriptures and history? He died and He resurrected. And He keeps repeating it. So in Revelation, when He keeps talking about people dying, it's an invitation to say, hey, are you going to join me on that cross and let me crucify you? This is what the first seal is about. Okay? Yeah, Richard?
Yeah, it's funny. I would have thought that it's about Jesus judging or killing the non-believers. You're saying it's actually the exact opposite. He's killing the believers, the ones who choose to believe in him and not...
What you're thinking is correct. He's doing it to non-believers.
Oh.
That's what gets you to be a believer.
But they have to be willing.
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought this was more referred to judgment, like the people who are lost causes.
He's going out to kill, and he succeeds with those who are willing to say yes. When God tells Daniel, hey, get down there in the lion's den, that's your time to say yes or no. If you say yes, you believe and appreciate and accept and trust and have faith. There's lions down there. Do you trust me? And so that's where you go from that transition to an unbeliever to a believer. But you don't cross over the threshold in this context unless you're letting him shoot you with that arrow. Questions? This is something very different than any of you have ever heard. It's highly unfortunate, but doesn't make it wrong. Any questions on this? We'll keep looking at this again week after week after week. As I've said since the day I got here, and I'll continue until the day I leave, the Bible, Revelation, the Bible keeps repeating Jesus' death and resurrection. That is your answer. That is your key. And what a surprise. It also keeps happening in Revelation. You'll keep seeing it again and again and again. Does this make sense with what you ladies and Emil were going through in your... Is that making sense as you're connecting the dots now a little bit?
So if I understand this correctly, first seal is...
But for the people online.
So if I understand this carefully, if I understand it, the first seal is really God sealing us because of the first, it's about our death to self, which is the first seal. Is that what it is? The death of Christ.
Well, we haven't brought out all the symbols yet. Okay. Once we look at all of them, and then we'll kind of do like a buffet, or in good Adventist theology, we'll do a, what's that food everybody likes to have? Haystacks. We'll do a little haystack, and we'll just throw all these symbols together, and we'll kind of say, okay, we really drilled down in first and seal and this. We've drilled down every word, and then we'll pull all the words together, and we'll say, okay, as we put them all together as a whole, which we haven't done yet, because there's still some other key words that haven't come out yet, as we put it all together, then we'll kind of say, okay, in 2-3 sentences, in a short paragraph, as you put all these 7 words, it's like dot to dot, as you connect all 7 words, what does it point to? And you're headed in the right direction. Yeah. Anybody else? Question? Comment? Okay. Now's the opportunity if you have one. If you don't, that's all right. All right. Let's see here. Well, that is our time. We've only got another 2 minutes. We won't be able to dig in time. So, for your sake, and for the sake of time, it helps for the most part. I'm not taking attendance, but it helps your sanity and the people around you if you keep coming and you bring your notes and you sit at the same table. Because, for example, this table here and this table, these 4 tables, you haven't even been able to share your word yet. And next week, if half of you are gone, or the other half who shows up are all at different tables, it takes longer. So stay at the same tables, bring your notes, it makes it easier. And you should have pages 1 through 15. You should have pages 1 through 15. If you don't, come up to me here when we finish and I'll give you what you need. But you should have pages 1 through 15. We'll end up probably like 23 pages, something like that. But So in closing, no relevant, profound questions, it sounds like it. Okay. Is it starting to make a little sense? We're taking the words, allowing them to be spiritual, plugging them in with the Christ focus, making sense. Okay? All right, let's close in prayer. Father in heaven, thank you for your goodness tonight. Thank you for revealing yourself as you say you love to do in the Bible, that if you'll be lifted up, you'll draw people to yourself. And we saw some glimpses of you this evening. Thank you for that privilege. May you continue not just to be on the board, not just in paper in the Bible, but may you be in our mind. I think Jan was sharing this tonight in one of the Bible verses, how the Holy Spirit's wanting to put Christ in our mind and in our lives, so we could be sealed in that. May that be the very case, that you just continue to conquer us more and more and more for our privilege and for your glory. And we pray it in your name, Jesus. Amen. So next week, same thing. Bring your concordance, bring your notes, be at the same table. It will help.